Welcome to the deep dive. So, if you, like, well, most of us, think about climate change, you probably jump straight to fossil fuels, carbon dioxide. But get ready for a bit of a shift today. We're diving into a whole stack of sources, starting with one called The Race to Curb the World's Most Powerful Climate Warming Gases. And our mission here really is to focus on something often overlooked, these superpollutants. We want to understand why cutting these specific gases might be the fastest way to actually slow down warming right now, but also why it's proving so difficult, why despite the obvious upside, we're sort of failing to regulate them effectively because of, well, economic and political hurdles.
That's right. I mean, the whole global conversation, it really is dominated by CO2.
Right.
And CO2 is absolutely critical, no question. It stays up there for ages. But if we're looking at the immediate threat, the near-term warming, we have to talk about potency. We're talking about things like hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, methane, nitrous oxide, gases that just punch way, way above their weight class compared to CO2. And this is often the aha moment for people. They might be present in smaller amounts, sure, but pound for pound, they're incredibly effective at trapping heat, sometimes thousands of times more so. And that sheer power means tackling them isn't just like a good idea, it's urgent. It's almost like global climate triage.
Okay, let me break that down a bit. Give us some scale. We've got HFCs, methane, nitrous oxide. You mentioned potency. The key measure here is their global warming potential, the GWP, right? So when we say significantly higher GWP, what does that actually look like? What does it mean in real terms?
Well, think of it like this. CO2 is kind of a slow burn, right? It hangs around for centuries, causing long-term chronic damage. These superpollutants, they're more like quick knockout punches. Very powerful, very fast-acting. For instance, some HFCs, they can have a GWP maybe 14,000 times higher than CO2, especially if you look over, say, a 20-year window. So 1 ton of that specific HFC is doing the warming work of 14,000 tons of CO2 in the short term. It's huge.
14,000, wow.
Yeah. And methane, another big one. It doesn't last as long in the atmosphere, maybe about a decade or so. But while it's up there, it's roughly 80 times more powerful than CO2 at trapping heat. So because these gases hit hard and fast, cutting their emissions now gives you a much quicker slowdown in the rate of warming within our lifetimes, potentially, which is something that just cutting CO2 alone, because it lasts so long, can't achieve quite as quickly.
That GWT difference really puts the mitigation opportunity into perspective, doesn't it? The return on investment, climate-wise, is just so much faster. So where do these super potent chemicals actually come from? Why are they so baked into our modern lives that getting rid of them is such a challenge?
Right. They are pretty much everywhere, and their sources vary, which is important for policy. Let's take HFCs first. These are mainly industrial synthetic chemicals. They became the workhorses for cooling after we phased out the old ozone-depleting CFCs. So think air conditioning in your car, your home, office buildings. Also large-scale industrial refrigeration, supermarkets, that sort of thing. The irony is, they were introduced to solve the ozone problem.
And ended up creating a massive climate problem instead.
Exactly. A huge climate problem.
But I remember reading, and this really surprised me, there was a link to something much smaller, more personal too.
Ah, yes, the medical side. Good point. Certain types of medical aerosols, especially some asthma inhalers, actually use HFCs as the propellant, the thing that pushes the medicine out. So tackling HFCs isn't just about industrial rules. It means working with the healthcare industry, making sure patients, often vulnerable ones, aren't left without essential treatments while we switch to greener options. It just shows how tangled this all gets.
Definitely complicates things.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's HFCs. What about the other two main ones? Methane and nitrous oxide. The sources shift quite a bit there, don't they?
Oh, completely different picture. Methane is predominantly from agriculture, specifically livestock farming, think cows and sheep and their digestion, plus manure management. Also, importantly, leaks from natural gas infrastructure pipelines, wells, processing plants, and landfills too. Nitrous oxide, or N2O, that's also heavily linked to agriculture, but more from the use of nitrogen-based fertilizers on crops.
So farming is a huge source for both of those.
A massive source. And because agriculture and energy infrastructure are so widespread and fundamental, the policies needed for methane and N2O are really different from the industrial standards approach for HFCs. You're looking at things like changes in farming practices, maybe different feed for cattle, capturing gas from waste, fixing pipeline leaks, managing fertilizer use better. Much more complex societal shifts, really.
Right. Knowing how deeply embedded these are, farming, energy, industry, even medicine, you'd think the world would have jumped on the mitigation opportunity. It seems like low-hanging fruit for climate action in a way. So what has been done globally? Is there a unified plan?
Well, This is where the story gets a bit messy. The global community has taken steps, yes, but it's fragmented. And, well, the success is limited. The biggest, most specific effort is probably the Kigali Amendment. You hear that name mentioned a lot. Yeah, Kigali is important, but it's crucial for you, the listener, to understand. Kigali only targets HFCs, the ones used mainly in cooling and refrigeration. It's basically an add-on to the Montreal Protocol, which was incredibly successful in fixing the ozone hole. And Kigali aims to phase down, not immediately phase out, but phase down the production and use of HFCs globally. The potential impact is huge, actually. Estimates suggest it could avoid up to half a degree Celsius of warming by 2100 if fully implemented.
Half a degree is massive in climate terms.
It really is. But again, that's just HFCs. For methane and N2O, it's different. You have things like the Global Methane Pledge, where countries make voluntary commitments to reduce methane emissions. These are often tied into national policies around agriculture subsidies or regulations on the energy sector. So no single treaty covers all the superpollutants. It's more patchwork.
Okay, let's stick with Kigali for a moment because the sources we looked at really highlighted a major breakdown there. You've got this global agreement aiming to phase down HFCs, but its effectiveness is apparently being seriously undermined by, well, it sounds dramatic, but a thriving black market. I mean, how effective can any global treaty be if there's widespread illegal trade going on?
This is exactly where environmental goals slam into hard economic realities. And right now, the incentive to cheat is often winning out.
Yeah.
What our sources show is that the cost of the legal, climate-friendlier alternative refrigerants, and maybe even more importantly, the cost of retrofitting or completely replacing the old cooling equipment to use those alternatives, it can be incredibly high for businesses, astronomical sometimes.
Right. New systems, new training.
Exactly. So what happens? A black market springs up. The profit margin on smuggling the banned, older HFCs, is just enormous. They're often produced cheaply in places with, let's say, less stringent enforcement. Then they get smuggled into markets like Europe or the US, often in these disposable cylinders disguised as something legal or mislabeled. It's essentially organized crime treating these chemicals like any other high-value, relatively low-risk smuggled good. They're profiting directly from the high transition costs that legitimate businesses are facing.
Well, it kind of makes a grim kind of sense. Big players maybe finding ways around it or benefiting from cheaper illegal inputs. But what about the smaller guys? The honest businesses, the local repair shops, the small grocery stores trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, one of the sources really focused on this, and it painted a pretty bleak picture. These small businesses, they're caught in a pincer movement. On one side, you have regulations demanding they switch to newer, compliant refrigerants and equipment. On the other side, the sheer cost of doing that is prohibitive. Imagine a small, independent supermarket. Their refrigeration system is old, it needs replacing. The brand new Kigali compliance system might cost, say, 3 times as much as getting an illegal refill or a dodgy, non-compliant unit through some back channel. For many, the honest path is simply unaffordable. They can't keep up with the constantly changing rules, especially if they suspect bigger competitors might be cutting corners without consequence.
And you've just nailed the core problem. It's a structural failure. The financial burden of this environmental transition, the HFC phase down, falls disproportionately hard on the small and medium-sized businesses. When the cost of playing by the rules is ruinously high, and the chances of getting caught using the illegal stuff, or the penalties if you do get caught, are relatively low, well, the black market doesn't just become an option for extra profit, it becomes a survival strategy for some. So yes, we have the alternative technologies, they exist, but we don't have the robust, globally consistent enforcement and, crucially, the financial support structures to make the legal path viable for everyone.
Okay, let's pull back for a wider view for a second, because there's a counter-argument here that came up in the sources. Some experts worry, quite genuinely, that putting so much focus, political, energy, funding, attention on these, let's call them niche gases, even though they're potent, that maybe it distracts from the main event, the bigger, harder, absolutely essential fight against CO2 from burning fossil fuels. Is this a dangerous distraction?
It's a fair question. It's often called the distraction dilemma. But the way the sources seem to synthesize it is that framing it as either HFCs versus CO2 kind of misses the point. It's not really about which one is more important overall. They operate on different timescales and need different solutions. We need to walk and chew gum at the same time, essentially. Pursue both in parallel. And if you link this back to the politics, HFCs, through Kigali, actually show that rapid, targeted global action is possible, at least on paper. We've made progress there, despite the black market issues. But methane and N2O, they really expose the deeper political challenge. Because tackling them effectively requires fundamental changes in huge, powerful sectors like agriculture and energy. And those sectors have deeply embedded economic interests and practices that make them incredibly resistant to quick change. It's less technical, more about political will and shifting economic incentives.
So if I'm hearing you right, the technical fixes for a lot of these super pollutants are actually available. We have alternative coolants for HFCs. We have technologies to detect and fix methane leaks from pipelines. We know about farming methods that can reduce methane and N2O. So if the technology isn't the main barrier, then the real bottleneck is purely political and social will, getting everyone on board and actually enforcing it.
Precisely. That's the crux of it. The ultimate challenge isn't really scientific innovation anymore, for these specific pollutants at least. It's achieving the necessary global unity. And maybe more critically, building the structures, the economic incentives, the enforcement mechanisms, the support systems to actually implement the solutions we already have consistently. Everywhere. We have to overcome those powerful economic forces that make the illegal route so tempting, the ones driving the black market and profit-seeking over compliance. Look, if the cost of doing the right thing puts honest small businesses under, while criminals get rich from selling the harmful stuff, then the regulation itself isn't working properly no matter how good the replacement technology is.
That really crystallizes it. Okay, let's do a quick recap for you, bringing together what we've covered in this deep dive. We started with the sheer, almost shocking potency of these super pollutants. HFCs, methane, nitrous oxide. Their high GWP means cutting them offers a vital, faster route to slowing climate change in the near term. We saw how widespread their sources are, everything from the air conditioner in your car to the food on your plate via farming and even essential medical inhalers. Then we looked at the global response, focusing on the Kigali Amendment for HFCs, but we immediately ran into the major roadblocks. That thriving, very profitable black market in banned HFCs, fueled by high transition costs, and the real economic pain for smaller businesses who often just can't afford to make the switch legally.
Exactly. And that brings us right to the final takeaway from this dive, the technology. It's largely there. It offers this potential fast-track solution for making a real dent in warming relatively quickly. But whether we actually achieve that success, it's entirely conditional. It hinges not so much on inventing new things, but on putting the right economic structures in place. Things like subsidies, robust enforcement, meaningful penalties, systems that make compliance the easier, more financially sensible option. That's how you foster real, effective global cooperation. So here's maybe a provocative final thought for you to chew on, building directly on that structural failure we discussed. Think about this. If the simple financial incentive to, maximize profit is powerful enough to create a massive, multi-billion-dollar international black market for these super polluting chemicals that are thousands of times worse than CO2 in the short run, what does that tell us about the sheer scale of the economic interventions? The carrots and the sticks, the financial incentives and penalties that will be needed to achieve real binding global compliance with the much larger, much more fundamental goal of reducing CO2 emissions across the entire economy. It suggests we really need to figure out the profit and cost equation before we can truly solve the climate equation. That's the underlying challenge we're left with.
And thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.